everyone. It's July 8th, 2018, and this is your episode 154 of At Percussion. I'm your host, Casey Cangelosi, and with me, as usual, are Laurel Black.
Hi.
And Megan Arns.
Hello.
Ben Charles is flying right now. He was supposed to be here today, but he had a flight reroute or something. So, hey, Ben, we miss you out there. And you guys, our guest today, he is originally from Detroit, but today he is the principal percussionist of the Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra. He has won several orchestral fellowships, and he's currently writing what sounds like a very interesting book series about streamlined percussion playing and doing so with ease and efficiency. I'm sure there's much better words to say about it than that. He'll tell us about that. And the first of these books is titled Spatial Studies, and it'll be available July 15th for pre-order and purchase on September 1st. He made a huge splash onto the scene when he was featured on, Megan, you said this was called Up Rocks?
Yep.
And I remember seeing this forever ago. What is Up Rocks exactly?
It's like an online video platform. Josh can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but sponsored by Red Bull
and Honda.
And Honda, yeah. And where they go and feature artists and different kind of like up and coming people. And so they did a really cool feature story on Josh, and it's kind of like a video blog. So it was awesome.
Cool. Yeah, it was like a little mini documentary.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, it was very, very cool. So, yep, he is out there on that, and you can learn a lot more about Josh and see more of his educational videos on drummojo.com, which I guess that's your personal website, Josh?
Yes, it is.
Cool. So you guys, thanks so much to Josh Jones for being with us today. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks again for having me. I'm really honored to be here.
Oh, yeah, man. Sure. So did I say everything about that new book right? Is it September 1st and July 15th and all that?
Yeah. Got the pre-order is going to start July 15th. I think I'm going to close those August 1st and then officially release the book September 1st. And then we'll be off to the races with the first of the series of, I think, possibly 10 volumes.
Wow.
So it's going to be a long haul.
Wow, cool.
Have you already planned all 10?
I have. I've actually been working on this book for at least 10 years. I started when I was 16. My best friend in high school said I should write a book after we started writing some cadences for drumline. And he was like, "Oh, these are great. You should write a book." So I just started writing. And it started out as just a little pamphlet for new drummers that were in this group that I was a part of. So I started with a small little book, and it grew to a bigger and bigger. It just kind of got away from me after a while. So there's 4 snare drum books currently. The 5th one will be an etude book for snare drums. 6th will be a xylophone book. 7th will be a timpani book. 8th will be, I believe, I can't remember what the 8th one is, accessories. 9th is what I think will be a cross between rudimental snare drumming and concert snare drumming, something that goes and blends the two pretty well together. And then the last one will be a method of movement.
Josh, I said Detroit, but you're from Chicago.
I am from Chicago.
Okay. So sometimes, just listeners, sometimes I'll write the introduction, sometimes Laurel will write the introduction, sometimes Ben will, and sometimes we say Detroit instead of Chicago. But it's very nice of you to not call me an idiot in front of everyone.
No, ever since the video came out, there's always been, they shot it in Detroit, but he's from Chicago.
Sure. So
there's always been a discrepancy now with both. But I've lived in both Detroit and Chicago.
Nice. So I always do my best to tell people that, they should buy my book first and foremost and not buy this other book. Do you have anything you want to add to that? Like why maybe they should buy yours?
I will say this book is...
That was a joke, by the way.
Which I do have your book. Just to say.
Oh, cool. I'll have yours soon.
The timing one.
Yeah, yeah.
It's incredible. I love it.
There we go. See, that's what I wanted out of this. That was the whole point. We can actually finish now.
Oh, Casey.
I know. Sorry.
But yeah, with my book, it's basically stick control on steroids,
Yeah.
if you want to think of it that way. But it also covers how to get a very relaxed base of technical facility. But I don't really pigeonhole the reader to anything. It's really an explorative process where I say like, oh, just lift your wrists in this fashion. It should feel a little bit like this. It may look like this. So there's a picture for what it might turn out to be. But it encourages the reader to discover their own bodies and not really tell them, oh, make sure your hands are flat, or like your thumb and first finger should be here in a specific place. It's more like, lift your wrist here. It might look like this. It should feel this way, that kind of thing.
Right.
So if anyone's really starting out, especially with the teacher, because a lot of these things, if you read it a certain way, might read for different, especially for younger people, they might not understand like, oh, my wrist should do this if I lift it a certain way. So having a teacher, I also in my book say, make sure you have a teacher to make sure you're not doing anything incorrectly or wrong. Although I never state that anything is wrong or incorrect. So it's a very ethereal book.
Cool.
Are you going to have, I actually have like 3 quick things. One is on episode 59, I did a segment on Josh's video, and it's called, the Uprock City series is called Uncharted. So if anyone wants to check that out, the title makes sense. They're looking for kind of undiscovered artists or up and coming artists and telling their stories through a video blog. Also, I just wanted to say something about Josh. I met Josh at Interlochen. He was a percussion teaching assistant one of the summers that I was there, and one of the things that stood out the most about Josh to me is that he spends so much time helping the students. A big part of that job is to play alongside the students, to help run percussion ensemble rehearsals, so many different things. They're assisting in so many different things, but Josh was always going above and beyond and making sure that the students got extra help with things, and they really gravitated towards him because, the students there are so outgoing. Well, not outgoing in like a personality way, but just like so curious and hungry for music, And so that extra help, I think a lot of people took you up on that, if I remember correctly. And anyway, I remember reading through one of the versions of one of your snare drum books, and I thought it was really great. And I'm just wondering, is there going to be any kind of video component to it, or like blog or asking live questions, or is there any way that you're going to incorporate technology into this series of books?
Yeah, my hope is to have videos. I was supposed to do it this summer. Unfortunately, I've been sick. Oh
no!
So I've been dealing with health. But I would love to have video accompaniment for sure.
Cool.
Just because I think it's really important for people to see all the possibilities that there are, even though it can be kind of overwhelming sometimes. So I'm really hoping, especially on my Instagram, now that Instagram has the TV thing, I could have like little mini lessons and little tutorials, and I can keep doing my live streams on Facebook. And I just want to make sure the information both gets out there and that it isn't misconstrued or misinterpreted in a bad way.
Right.
Instagram has TV?
Yeah.
What?
I think it's the length is either 15 seconds to 15 minutes.
Oh. And is it like YouTube? Like they'll stay up there, or is it?
Yeah, I think so. I posted 5 old videos that just happen to be it has to be in vertical mode. So that's the only catch. But I had 5 old videos on vertical already, so I just posted those, and they're kind of awkward too.
I miss the old days of MySpace and YouTube. And it was so easy.
Casey, come on. It's easier now.
It's so hard now.
It's easier.
Oh man, it's really hard.
I guess what's hard is like you have to keep up with it so often.
There's
so much you have
I agree.
to keep doing. I feel like I'm working 3 jobs now, trying to keep up with it all.
Yeah.
Well. I mean, yeah. In all seriousness, yeah. Of course, none of it's hard. There's just a lot of it, and they say, Facebook. This is what I last heard. Facebook is the most important platform because the widest demographic is on it. But then there's a certain age group that is only on Instagram, and then there's another age group below that is what's another one? Stitcher, Twitter. There's another one.
Snapchat.
Snapchat,
yeah,
like the youngest group is on Snapchat, so like they're kind of shifting, and yeah, I'm just trying to, like, I enjoy it too, like it is fun to share, and it keeps you active and kind of keeps you lightly accountable, if you want to say, keeps you doing stuff. But yeah, it is kind of a mystery. Like, okay, I'm trying to figure out how to utilize Instagram. I get how it works, but I don't quite know. I don't quite think what's on my desk is interesting to look at for anybody, and but maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't help that you feel really old when you can't remember what they are. When you're like, you kids and your snappy grams and your.
I know it's so. But what's really fun is how, Laura, the students say they have all their own language. Like they say, "Oh man, that was lit," or "Oh, that was savage."
Extra, yeah.
Oh, it's really fun. It's really fun in rehearsal to misuse one of those words. Oh, they laugh. It's so fun. You go like, guys, that was okay, but we need to play it. Can you play it a little more lit? Anyway.
Do you ever just like dab during rehearsal?
Right. Can you play it with more dab? Right. That's good. I think I'm so old. Hey, well, we do actually have a question related to that, and it's from our buddy Brandon Arvay. He says, "You've become pretty active on social media recently. What value are you finding social media brings to you and your career, and what value do you hope to bring to others?"
Okay. I think the most important thing for me was just making sure that I was seen in a good light, and that might seem kind of self-serving, but I'll say what I mean. I feel like being in the position that I am in and having the kind of draw that kind of, I don't know, people just kind of gravitate towards me. I think it's important for people to see positive things, good information as far as technical facility and musicality and things like that. Just the more positive side of music and the world, kind of like. And I like being able to put that out there a lot. And while I always do technical, I love technique, so I'm always doing technical videos and practice videos. So that's always fun. But every once in a while, I'll just post a picture of like my snare drum in the lake, or I think I posted something with a Buddha statue once, and just talking about meditation and how important it is for mental health and to take care of yourself and things like that. So I'm always trying to put out positive things for people, and it's very cathartic for me as well, because I'm kind of alone up here in Canada, so it's nice to have like people I can support from here, as well as receive support from them.
Where is Calgary, Josh?
We're above Minnesota, so
okay.
I actually had to go up there or down there for some more. What was my thing? I had to go down there to renew my visa, so I had to see a little bit of Minnesota. It was very, what do you call it? Quaint or something.
Quaint. Yeah, I'm on Google Maps here. Yeah, you're really up there.
We're all the way over here.
Yeah.
Time area.
Well, let's give Josh a quick break from talking, and I will give you guys my sound for the day.
Awesome.
So, hint is that this is an instrument. It's an electronic instrument, and it actually has a quick tie to where Josh is right now. And I'll explain that towards the end. So if you happen to know this instrument, let us know. Okay, any ideas?
I don't know the name of this instrument, but is it in a museum here in Calgary?
It could be. I wouldn't be surprised. The reason Calgary comes up in what I'll share with you is that a group called Oddities Studio of Calgary, Alberta, Canada has rebuilt it, and they're circulating a rebuilt version of it. Do you know?
I can't remember what it's called, but I've seen it.
Cool.
Oh man, I can't remember what it was called. They had it in the Studio Bell Museum, I think.
It has kind of a difficult name, but I wonder. I was expecting people to maybe say, "Well, it sounds like a theremin," and it is often used. It is not a theremin, but it sounds a lot like one, and it has a lot of the same glissando characteristics because it does have this pitch slider you can use. This is an instrument called the Onde Martineau. Yeah, cool. So the company that has remade it is called Oddities Sound Studio. So they've made something called the Ondia, because I guess the Martineau name is still under patent, although they've stopped making them. So anyway, it's the Onde Martineau, which is named after the creator Maurice Martineau, and the name basically translates to Martineau's waves in French. And what you heard was a little excerpt of the melody from Ravel's Pavane of the Sleeping Beauty, which is of course originally a piano piece, and it was played by Genevieve Gruyere on our Onde Martineau, and she's made a huge career performing as a Martineau soloist. She has about a dozen CDs or so and has performed all over the world. And if you look up the Martineau on YouTube, you'll find all sorts of stuff, and one where she's giving a great little demonstration. There's also someone named Thomas Block out there who's doing the same thing, soloing all over on the Martineau. I actually downloaded both their CDs. They're really cool. This is what I always do. I get really excited about a sound segment. I download the CDs, and then I never find time to listen to them, but I mean to. So,
Casey, how do you spell the Martineau?
Martenot.
Okay.
Yeah, Martineau. And
I also just Googled it. I was like, how do you spell that?
I want to see.
And owned is the harder word, I think. Ondes, which again just means waves. So let's see. Yeah, created by Maurice Martineau in 1928. He was a cellist and wanted to create an instrument that had the same expressive potential and quality of the cello. It's a monophonic instrument. And he, I guess his electronic background is in telecommunications during World War I. And apparently he met with theremin, the creator of the theremin, and was very inspired by the mechanics and the electronics and how it worked and created this instrument to kind of follow it. It's been used by several rock and pop artists, including Frank Zappa, and probably most well-known is Radiohead. They've used it to a much more known extent because I think it's pretty hip to use the vintage stuff now. It's also been widely used by a few composers, Arthur Honegger, Darius Milhaud, Giacinto Scelsi, who we've talked about one of his instruments on the podcast before, Pierre Boulez. And in the case of Edgar Varese, it was used as a stand-in for two theremins in his piece, Equatorial. So another connection, and why I chose to talk about this instrument today, is because remember the last instrument I talked about was Wagner's church bells in Parsifal. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were called Grail bells, and we talked about not the bells he wanted, but the instrument that was commissioned to be the substitute of the bells. And I said there have been several solutions to this over the years, and especially back then, after this instrument was made, they used Owen Martineau several times. Several opera companies, that was their favorite way to do it, because you can adjust some of the settings to create, I guess, what sounds like bells, bell tones. So what I read said bell tones, and I would hope they're mixing those tones with a bell plate or hopefully like a brake drum or something metallic, and then they're just getting the pitch from the Martineau. So yeah, basically it's a keyboard console, and in your right hand you play the pitches, and then in your left hand you control what's called the tiroir, which means the drawer, and it's literally a little drawer that pulls out. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see, I'll post some photos here. I need to be better about saying I'm posting photos, because I think people don't know that I still do that sometimes. So anyway, here's for you guys. I'll just post in the chat here. So you can see one hand just plays that single melody, and then the other hand has the drawer that has the timbre and dynamic adjustments. And the thing you usually see them manipulating with their left hand is the one big glass button. It looks kind of white in this photo, but it's a glass button, and that's why the instrument is so expressive. That's a dynamic knob, so the further you push it in, the louder the sound gets. And I think that's why the instrument has such a expressive characteristic that a lot of electronic instruments don't. So many electronic instruments are just, monodynamic, but this one seems really, really built to be specifically have a dynamic range. Yeah, Laurel?
Yeah, so I watched a video of Geneviève playing this, and I noticed that she would move her right hand on the key and vibrato would come out. Is that how vibrato is done, or was she just doing that but actually creating it with her left hand instead? Yeah,
that's a way cool question. So the keyboard is actually just, I watched someone describe it, and he said it is just for show. So you can, of course, get those exact pitches, but at first the keyboard wasn't there at all. And if you look carefully at the right hand, you can see that wire. That is all the pitches, but it just glissandos. So so if you watch someone play it, they'll move one key, they'll go do re, but if they want to slide up to it, they can just move the cable, move the little ring on their finger across the cable, and they'll slide up to it. And then of course they could just take their hands off the keys entirely and just slide and glissando up and down. And I actually have a new little synthesizer to show you guys. This is something you can buy on Amazon for literally, if it's something like $20, it's really cheap. It's battery powered. This is called the Gakin Analog Synthesizer 5X150 Mark II is what it's called. And it actually works kind of the same way. There is this little slider.
What? Are you writing a piece with that in it?
Oh yeah, dude, no, I've got so much work to do with this thing. And then of course it has all sorts of adjusting things, like I can play with these knobs and oh, my battery's dying. But you can see on a slider like that, it's really hard. Like if you try to play Happy Birthday on that, it's like, oh man, it feels like playing a theremin. You're like, man, where are these pitches? You have to be so exact. So there are other versions of these little synthesizers out there, these little handheld synthesizers that have basically little keyboards drawn on that strip. And they're very accurate. I played with one of those too, and you can really get the pitches just right. So basically that's what's happening here. And you've got the keyboard basically over one of these strips. So it's connecting right at the correct pitch. And then if you want to stay away from that, you can of course just use the cable to slide back and forth. Yeah, it's really, really nice music. I got really over this last week, I got really into what I was hearing. Another interesting thing is the loudspeaker setup. So let me post that for you guys. Laurel, I think Caleb is playing drum set.
Is that what I hear?
Oh, you hear it? Dang it.
Yep.
Well, I just hear thuds.
There's thuds. Yeah, I think that's Caleb. So these three things you're looking at are the optional speakers that come with it. So there are three loudspeakers that Martineau invented. You have the really square-looking one, which is called the principal. It's just a regular loudspeaker. The one on the left, that's very round-looking, is called the metallic loudspeaker, and that round metallic thing in there is a gong. So there's a speaker behind the gong, and it shoots the sound into the gong, and the gong vibrates. And so you get sympathetic vibration. And then the really weird one is a loudspeaker he called a palm diffuser. And that's exactly what it looks like. It's a soundboard with a speaker behind it and a bunch of strings. And they're pitched strings, and the strings vibrate as the sound passes over it. So I couldn't figure out, though, if you can have all three plugged in at the same time, and then something on the drawer operator can switch between them. I thought certainly that's the case, because that'd be a way to get all these really, really cool effects, but I'm not sure about that. So just to wrap up a little bit, straight from Wikipedia, this says the instrument's eerie, wavering notes are produced by varying the frequency of oscillation in vacuum tubes. The production of the instrument stopped in 1988, but several conservatories in France still offer instruction to the students on this instrument. In 1997, the Ondier project began designing an instrument based on the Ons Martineau. Since the Martineau name is still protected, the new instrument is called Ondia. I'm not sure if I'm saying that exactly right, but it's Ondea. But has the playing, the playing and operational characteristics of the original on Martineau. So yeah, the new one is the same characteristics as the original Martineau. In 2001, a completed prototype was first used in concerts. These instruments have been in regular use since 2005. In 2017, a new version of the Ondia, built by Oddity Studio of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, became available. So the instrument survives, and I think for a really good reason. I've like kind of been enthralled by it and bought two CDs out of it.
Cool.
So yeah, the podcast is 2 more CDs in the red.
Put it on the card.
Oh yeah, that's going on tax deduction at the end. So yeah, that's your sound for the week.
Very cool.
Nice.
I just think it's just so interesting that the keyboard is there for show.
Well, and sorry, it's not. I mean, it's not just show. It's because you can play the keys. I mean, you do play the keys, but they're just pinpointing the placement on the strip.
Yeah, sure.
Like on
like a trombone
strip.
Or something, like. Or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah, and I wish I had the words of exactly what this person was saying online. I was watching, but like you don't need the keyboard to play it, basically.
Right.
Like you could remove the keyboard and take 2 little metal pieces and play on the strip. But yeah, I mean it would completely help to have fingering technique, and I mean I don't think there's a version of it created anymore that is without the keyboard manual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Laura, you got something for Josh?
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought another Facebook question. So this one comes from Sean McWilliams. So getting kind of back to your book for a second. He says,
Okay.
as you're writing, have you looked into Alexander technique and its application in playing with ease?
Okay, so backtracking a little bit, the book first started just as all exercises, just all stick control exercises that I've always done or just thought of. And there's now about over 5,000 exercises in this one book.
Mm.
So figuring that might be a little overwhelming for people, I started looking more into how to move and how to get a relaxed technical facility and bass. And when I went to DePaul, I started studying with Mark Demolakis, and he introduced me to the technique called Feldenkrais, which is another method of movement developed by Moshe Feldenkrais. And both are basically the same thing. The way I describe Feldenkrais is more explorative. You usually will start a session on the floor, and they'll tell you to move really slowly and to relax all of your muscles into the floor, letting gravity just kind of sit you on the floor. And then you start slowly moving little things like a finger here, or maybe your eyes, and you just start exploring your body and trying to figure out, like, when you move your neck a certain way, does your knee start tensing? Or like if you start moving a shoulder, does your left toe start tensing? So you start noticing tension in different places. And as you go through these processes, this is like just a very quick version. As you start going through these processes, you start eliminating unnecessary tension. And so your movement becomes easier. And so in my book, I start off basically telling the person to lay on the floor. I have pictures showing you how to do it. And it goes from laying on the floor to sitting, figuring out a good base of how to sit correctly for drum set players. And then I tell you how to, stack your body on top of itself, sitting first, and then standing. And so it's a pretty good progression going from on the floor to standing.
I took a Feldenkrais class at Florida State University.
Oh, nice.
They have a class called Feldenkrais because the flute teacher is certified in it. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, I learned a lot. I have never worked with Alexander technique, so that was the first time doing something like that for me. And I changed a lot of things about my posture in like a very formative time.
Mm-hmm.
She had us bring our instruments in. I brought my snare drum in multiple times. And, non-percussionists commenting on different places where they could see tension or, like you said, she would always remind us that it's not actively doing anything. It's not physically doing something, but noticing. Just notice that it's there.
Yep.
Not necessarily release that tension, but just notice it. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it really changed my playing a lot, especially after studying with Mark. Just if you guys have ever seen him play, he's amazing. Like, it's so natural and it's so scary. And I wanted that. So I would ask him so many questions like, oh, how do you do this? And I was so interested to figure out what he was doing physically and how I could apply that to my own physicality. And he would always tell me, oh, the finding is in the doing, or, oh, you have to search for it. He would never give me the answer. Mm-hmm. And so I think I only took one Feldenkrais class in college, and I was just so amazed by it and loved exploring that I just started doing it myself and like doing a lot of random things and trying to figure out why I was tense in a certain place and figuring out different pathways of connection, as I like to say. And after doing that for so many hours and hours, it really influenced my teaching a lot, because now I can look at a student, I don't even have to look at the student. I can hear what the sound sounds like, and I know where they're tense automatically, which is a weird thing, which is why I loved teaching at Interlochen, because it was so easy for me to tell the student, oh, just relax your right shoulder, or, oh, your left calf is tense. Like, I didn't need 20 minutes. I only needed like 2 minutes with the student to figure out what was wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I'd like to ask a pianist or string player, but definitely a string player, like if at some point in their learning that they are exposed to Alexander technique, you know, like is it mentioned in lessons? Is it a required class at a summer camp? And I wonder if the answer is yes for the majority. It seems like it is, right? I mean, it seems to be much more built into their foundation, right? And for us, it's not. And I mean, it seems like it's just starting. I mean, I don't know. I feel like there was a very long time before I was introduced to this, and it would have been really helpful early on. And, you know, Laurel talks about a lot of this on the podcast, and it's so helpful. And I spend a lot of time thinking about it now, but I didn't early on. And I really try to make sure that I'm always talking about this stuff with my students and not assuming that they're thinking of it. Because especially in school, it's like, gotta learn this, gotta go. And, you know, often it's like, no, what they gotta do is like chill out for a second and think.
Yeah. Yeah, we always hear the people saying, our teachers saying, relax. Like, what does it mean to relax?
What does it actually
mean? Where
am
I relaxing? Why do I need to, you know, I just wanted to be able to answer those questions for any student I came across. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, just relax your right shoulder.
Do you find though sometimes you tell someone, okay, you know, let's say for instance, okay, we don't want you playing like this. We want you playing like, you know, bend your wrist. Don't just only use your elbow. And you'll say, hey, relax your forearm. And they just can't.
Yeah. So these are the fun students. So this is why I need a method of movement book in between some of these books. Because as you start adding more difficulty, you have to start adding a little bit of tension that's necessary for like double stroke rolls or things like that. And so finding a student who can't release tension in a certain area, you start looking for areas that are either closer to or farther away from. And something that I think Mark used to tell us would be, and I might be misquoting him, but I think some things he would ask us to do was to free up a different area that was easier to free up. So like if your forearm's really tense and you can't relax that, he might tell you to relax your shoulder, and that would be connected to that line of connection.
Or that's exactly what Laurel has done.
Yeah, this is why I love Laurel.
Yeah, no, it's exactly it. Laurel talks about your jaw and
the jaw. There's a whole thing about Moshe Feldenkrais talking about the jaw, and like there's some videos where I'll have people who know what I'm doing, and they'll be like, Josh, your jaw's tense. Like, I know, I'm sorry, I haven't been practicing. Yeah, but it's really important because you'll find especially if you have pain in certain places. Like I've had students, not even students, here at the University of Calgary, there were some bassoon students or clarinet students that were having tendonitis or things like that. And I'd see their posture and I'd be like, well, you know, your neck's like a little weird up here. Or do you have to sit this particular way? Or is there a way you can, you know, hold the instrument like you're just letting the weight of the instrument be a part of your body? That's a big thing about me. Just making sure the instrument is incorporated in your body. Like it's a part of you. It's not you're holding it and doing something with it. It is a part of your natural physicality. So that's a whole nother, that could be a whole nother segment.
Yeah. Do you find yourself having to hold back giving unsolicited comments to people?
Oh yeah, especially when I first learned about it, because I was so excited. I felt like I had learned like the holy grail of everything. Like the first time you probably learn molar stroke and learn how to do the push pull motion. Like you're just like, oh, I need to tell everybody. So yeah, it took especially the first year I was at Interlock, and I was like in everybody's face, just telling all the students, you have to relax, join the group. So yeah, it's really exciting, but also making sure that I'm not giving like, oh, you're supposed to do it this, just making sure I'm not inputting myself where I'm not wanted.
Well, Laurel, I think this has a lot to do with what you're going to talk about today. Yeah, you're going to go more on anatomy of drumming.
Yeah, it's a great segue. So this is the second part of my little review summary of a book called The Anatomy of Drumming by John Lamb. And I thought it would fit really nicely in Josh's episode because of his book and just knowing some of the things that he cares about are the same things that I really care about. So I read a few more chapters, a chapter about the senses, posture, and then the spine. And within those, I found kind of 4 large ideas to just share with you to summarize the book thus far. So the first idea, Lamb writes that there are 5 senses most important to a performer. He says those are sound, pain, touch, sight, and movement or kinesthesia. When it comes to sound, there are 2 ideas that were cool to me to read about. One is tactile sound, which is vibrations felt by sensors in the skin that aren't your ears that allow you to hear. So someone like Evelyn, she has said that she plays barefooted because then she can feel the vibrations. That's a great example of tactile sound. Another way that we can hear is called conduction hearing, which is when bones in the inner ear vibrate from sound and they bypass the eardrum in order to do that. And Lamb uses the example of Beethoven biting on a rod that was connected to his piano so that he could hear the notes through his bones. And I couldn't believe I'd never heard of that before.
Ouch. That
I've heard of
sounds...
it. I heard we're not sure if that's true or not.
Okay.
And like he'd saw the legs off his piano, put it on the floor and like listen.
Yeah.
I've heard
but
that.
We don't know if either are true. Anyway, it's not important.
Yeah. But if it were true, that would be a great example of conduction hearing.
Fine.
Yeah. So let's skip forward to the sense of pain. And something he writes is that not all pain is a warning. And a little caveat, I'd say, yeah, that's true. But sometimes it really is. And so you should listen to it. And so the thing I would add is that pain at or inside one of your joints, like your elbow or inside your shoulder, is always a warning, 100% of the time. Pain at a muscle could be normal wear and tear or a signal of growth, that those muscle fibers are kind of repairing themselves. So I would say not all soreness is a warning, but pain probably always is. A little bit about kinesthesia. Here I'm just going to quote what he writes. Kinesthesia tells you about movement speed, quality of movement, the force and effort you exert, body position, as well as about the tension on your muscles, connective tissue, and joints. So that aligns so much with what you guys were just talking about with the Feldenkrais of noticing the quality of your movement and the effort you exert. Those are the biggest things. If you can just learn how to listen. And if you can't, an idea that I have if you are trying to learn how to listen to your body is to look at it as you're moving it. Because we know that the sense of sight takes over our brain power over all the other senses when our eyes are open. So if you're trying to figure out like what's going on with your elbow, move your elbow and look at it as you do it. And this is one of the reasons that we always like to have mirrors in our practice rooms and things like that, is so you can actually look at it and to make those changes much more quickly. The second large idea that Lamb gives us is that as we develop as players, we're not so much developing independence always, but coordination. And I think of that especially as something Casey has mentioned in terms of chops and speed, that it's not always about just can each hand go this fast, yes or no. It's about coordinating them together. Mm-hmm. And Lamb quotes a book called The Putt and the Pendulum, so I'm assuming it's for golfers. The authors, Wegner, Ansfield, and Piloff, write, errors may be prompted by a monitoring process that increases sensitivity to the most undesirable outcome of an intention. So to translate that, saying basically in our efforts to think so much about coordinating what we need to do, we actually make ourselves choke about it because we start thinking about it too much and we put the wrong kind of focus there. And I wrote a blog post about this a couple of years ago, and it's essentially the frontal cortex of your brain gets way too involved. And so we choke. Because as musicians that practice, we put things into a more long-term memory sort of place. The frontal cortex gets too involved. It all becomes too short-term and too micromanagey, and we'll choke. And to that, huh?
Oh, sorry. What you just said reminds me of that Liszt triangle excerpt. Da-ding, 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 da-ding. It's like, that's so difficult for a lot of people. And I know when I was a student, man, I thought, oh, this is easy until they started teaching me about it. And then it was the hardest thing in the world. And I thought, man, I wish I could go back to when I didn't know anything about it. I could just play it. Now I can't play it at all because I'm so worried about them being exactly the same and just the most ridiculously quiet dynamic. And it suddenly became not only, on one hand, great. I knew more about it. I knew what I needed to know, but it became actually like literally impossible to play. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, but
oh yeah.
yeah. I feel like that happens a lot. It's like things become over complicated. And anyway.
Or even like getting in your own head. Also, there are some with some pieces, and losing the passion for it too. So this is like opening a can of worms in the middle of Laurel's segment, but like,
sorry.
Either.
That's all right.
Yeah, I'm sorry too. Learning too much about a piece, or who knows, whatever. But then you kind of sometimes I wish I could go back to when I had first heard the piece or was first learning it, and it's like, you had to have this passion for it, because sometimes you lose the music, that natural music, when you practice it for too many hours or look at it in too many ways. Yeah. And of course the opposite effect happens too. When you learn more about something, you're able to understand it on many levels, and but it's interesting.
Yeah, trying to always have a beginner's mind, as the Buddhists would say.
Nice. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I looked at Casey a few months ago, and I was like, I forgot that I play music because I like it.
Yeah.
Like sometimes, I guess I felt like I'd spent a shocking amount of time just playing music and working really hard at it, but and then I kind of forgot how much I liked it, and that's what I need to focus on.
Yeah.
Not so much, is it perfect? Would it meet this person's standards? Does it meet mine? Does it compete among the people I admire? All these things. I'm just like, you know what? I like it. That's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, it was without getting too into it, there was some sort of comfort level knowing that I knew so much. I know how the piece goes. I know it needs to be this perfect and this tempo, and when I started approaching things more like, I don't know how this is going to go. Let's see what happens. It was one really vulnerable and scary, but I found that I was more expressive, learned things faster, had more success, and I started getting out of rounds quicker and things like that without having to micromanage every single thing. And you find with having that sense of play, you're a lot more flexible to having a wet hall, playing in a wet hall, or playing on a different instrument, or playing a round that you're not used to. You just have a lot more freedom. So yeah, definitely, I agree with all of y'all.
I like you called it sense of play, because we definitely have talked about the value of play several times in the past. Anyway, Laurel.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I only have two other big points to go through with you guys. John Lamb has a chapter about posture, and Megan mentioned posture just a few minutes ago, and that he writes it isn't a position, but it's a tool to use to keep yourself healthy. And
I wish you guys could see Josh right now.
That's what I'm laughing at.
You should read my book.
Enthusiastic. Yeah. Posture is not a position, but a tool. And so when you're in a a mode of good posture, the weight of your body is supported optimally by your bones, not by your muscle holding it up. And so, like the phrase sit up straight has this connotation that you need to hold yourself up right there. But the truth is you actually stack really nicely from your hip up through your spine to your shoulders to your neck, and they will support themselves if you just set them up in alignment. But that's not how we tend to think of it, because we always have this force called gravity pulling us down. So in a way, posture ends up being a lot about balance, about just putting yourself in the right place to where you balance exactly where you need to be, so your muscles don't have to work very hard. To that end, Lamb writes about 6 balance points. These are the AO joint, which is where the skull attaches to the spine, the shoulders, the lumbar spine, which is the curve just above your butt, your hips, knees, and then lastly, your ankles. So of those, the AO joint is one of the most important to set up before everything else. Because when we move, our heads tend to lead whatever movement we're doing. So if we have our head held funny at the top of our neck, if you think about where that would be, it kind of sets up the rest of your back to do really funny things to compensate for it, which is why we'll get sore backs when we play vibraphone or drum set or timpani, whatever it is. So the AO joint is the articulation of the atlas, which is the uppermost vertebrae, teeny tiny cervical vertebrae, and then the occiput, which is the bottom of the skull, and it kind of just balances there on the top of the atlas. If you want to think about kind of the center of your head in line with your ears, and then drop down maybe a centimeter to an inch, that's about where that joint is, just to give you some type of sensation of where that is. And you can actually nod your head slightly and use just that top vertebrae. So if you start to move more than an inch, you're going to be accessing those other cervical vertebrae, but less than an inch, you're probably using just that top one. Let's see. So from wherever you are, I was trying to think of different posture exercises if you're in the car, if you're sitting, like whatever you happen to be doing, to experience what happens even when we do something as small as misaligned things up there at that AO joint. So if you slouch your head forward, which probably makes the rest of your spine curve in a C, and then you try to raise your arms to the level of your shoulders, it's probably unpleasant, and you probably get weird pings at the top of your shoulders, and it maybe feels really difficult. But if you try to sit up straight and just imagine out of that AO joint that everything comes up forward, so your spine goes through the center of your head and up towards the ceiling, and then try to raise your arms again, it should be much easier. And that's a really super quick explanation of that. But slouching and raising your arms versus not slouching gives you some sensation of what we're talking about here. Something else about posture that I've mentioned on the podcast, and that Lamb mentions really quickly, is that it does affect our emotion. In the sense that, a body of despair can't hold joy, and a body of joy doesn't hold despair. So that's another reason to think about kind of how you posture yourself in life. The last big point I want to make is about the spine and the vertebrae which make it up. I think understanding how the spine is made up of, or what it's made up of and how they're arranged, can really help keep things aligned and keep us from pain. And I can tell Lamb thinks the same thing, because he does spend quite a bit of time on this. So each vertebrae has 2 different regions. There's part called the vertebral body, which is the big chunky part that supports weight. And then there's the vertebral process, which sticks out and has claws, if you will. Lamb describes them, and this is a quote, as pokey outy dinosaur things.
What?
It's very scientific.
Can you imagine the dinosaur with the spikes back? Pokey outy dinosaur things.
I get it.
Stegosaurus, you mean?
So if you feel your back, you can feel the processes, those things that point out. Those are the vertebral processes. So at those points, not only do they kind of help protect the weight-bearing part of the spine because they are so pokey. But they also allow nerves and tendons to attach there because they need to attach somewhere, and that's where they attach. And of course, the muscles that move the spine tend to be pretty big because the spine has to support so much of what the body does. So those muscles are big, hence all those different places and the kind of large processes that stick out from them. Something that is really, it became very important to me as a reminder as soon as I read it in his book, has to do with the vertebral bodies and where they are inside our body. So we tend to think of our spine as most likely just straight with the skin on your back, but that's actually not true at all. When you get down to the lumbar spine, which is the lower back, kind of right above your butt, the part of your spine that supports weight is actually about midway in your torso. It curves in that far. So everything behind it is muscle, and probably a little fat, let's be honest. And then stuff in front of it is organs, muscle, and a little fat. Organs are behind it too. But the spine's like right there in the middle, which is, I think, a really key visualization when it comes to posture and putting yourself in a good balance point. Now, as we travel up the spine, that changes a little bit. So up at your rib cage, your spine can't be in the middle because you have lungs there and a rib cage and stuff. So it's a little closer to your back body. And actually, as it comes up through your neck, it gets a little closer to the front. So the spine actually curves quite a bit. And that's what allows it to function kind of like a shock absorber and really help us to just not break totally if we lean to hit a cymbal or, something like that, bend over to pick up a pair of cymbals. So that's hopefully a somewhat quick summary of this next part of John Lamb's book. And I look forward to getting through to the rest of it. He's got lots of pictures of drumming techniques and stuff like that. So I'm excited to tell you guys about that too.
Awesome.
It's amazing to me how, as Laurel's been reading this book, there have been so many things that, pretty much everything she has either reported on her blog, and it's the exact same thing with either a similar diagram or maybe even the exact same one from wherever they happen to both find it. And how many times just now Josh Jones was like fists in the air celebrating what Laurel was saying. Like there's so much consensus, and from the little bit I've heard of Alexander technique and from, little workshops here or there I've taken over the years about these things, like, yeah, man, there's so much consensus to this, which is, I don't know, that's a really good thing. And I know I've shown my brother, he's a musculoskeletal radiologist, I've shown him and his wife, who is a nurse, they've of course seen videos of me playing and Laurel playing and other percussionists playing. And they just said, oh yeah, there's no way you all don't have tendonitis. And that being said, anything will give you tendonitis. I can just sit here and do this. I'm getting tendonitis. It just means your tendons are getting exercised. But, there's a degree in which it becomes harmful and they get inflamed too much, and then it's a problem. But so, yeah, it's really great to know Laurel, Josh, and this Lamb guy, John Lamb, Laurel?
John Lamb.
You guys are all tackling this because it's like, it's certainly something we're all dealing with, even if we don't, feel the pain yet or whatever.
Oh yeah. Like, because we are musicians and make these repetitive motions thousands, if not up to 1 million times in our lives, like, we are the people that need to know that we're using our bodies in the most easeful way. Because if anybody's going to get messed up, it's got to be us.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It's always hard to teach or to unteach or something.
Yeah. Unlearning is a major hurdle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Megan, do you have a Facebook question there? I think there's two that kind of go together.
There are two that kind of go together. So maybe I'll just ask them together and you can unpack them.
Tucker.
Yeah, you can unpack them however you want, Josh. The first one is Drew Tucker, and he asks, when you look at the percussion sections in most orchestras, they are predominantly older white males. Do you feel a certain weight being a young African American in a full-time orchestra? For example, does it feel more important to be visible for a future generation of younger players so they see what's possible? And are there challenges that you face in your specific job that are related to that fact? And then Teddy Hall Jr. kind of tacks on to Drew Tucker and asks, what can we do as percussion teachers to encourage more interest among minorities that desire to pursue a career as an orchestral percussionist, as well as continue to promote awareness of the need for more diversity in the percussion section of the major orchestras?
Good questions.
Whenever I'm approached with these questions, I never know exactly how to say it. Growing up in Chicago, I was very, very fortunate to be a part of the Percussion Scholarship Program. It's a program that was headed by Chicago Symphony Orchestra percussion section player, Patsy Dash,
Yeah.
and lyric opera percussion player, Douglas Waddell. Married couple, wonderful people. And their whole idea was to teach elementary school kids from 4th grade till they went to high school how to play percussion. And they were serving mostly underprivileged areas, of which I was a part of one. And they just kind of taught me how to do it all. They basically became my second mom and dad and raised me in percussion. Had I not had that opportunity, I probably wouldn't be here. Actually, I'm actually the first member of that group to have a professional orchestra job.
Wow.
Which is kind of crazy.
That's amazing. They must be so proud.
Yeah. But that being said, their program wasn't intended to make sure every single person had an orchestral job. It was more to have something that kids could go do after school, teach them the values of music, like empathy, hard work, discipline, things like that. If they went on into music, great. But also people went on to have jobs in the medical field. Somebody's inventing things right now at Harvard. We have people go to Yale. You know, it's not just about music. It's about developing a good, basically raising a good human being. And that being said, making sure that I was in a position to both be a mentor to people that either wanted to do music or not, just giving them a positive role model. And somebody that they could talk to and somebody that looked like them. That was really important. So after graduating that program, I would always go, I would always go back to my elementary school and teach what I had learned that week. Or the first year after I started that program, I started helping Doug teach the new beginners. Like, oh, make sure your thumb and first finger are here. Watch out for this. You know, I'm like this little 11-year-old teaching another 10-year-old how to do it. But I guess that whole idea of and their passion for teaching kind of inspired me to do it myself. So I would always do it anyway. And now having a job, but even before I had a job, I would always try to make sure that if I went somewhere, I would try to visit a school or just to talk to the band director or talk to the kids in the band section, have a little sectional. And this would all be for free. I wouldn't ask for anything. I would just go in and volunteer my time because, one, schools don't have the money for it. There's always cuts in arts education, especially nowadays. So if anybody's going to do it, I have the time, I have the energy, I have the information, and now I have a little bit of status, whatever this is. So it was really important for me to do it mainly for younger kids, but definitely for people of my community. Yeah, so that's one question, I think. And as far as being basically Black in a orchestra, something Doug told me before I left PSG for college, he was like, without getting too into it. Josh, you're doing really well, and you're going to college. And as soon as you go to college, a lot of people are going to start saying things. Just want you to be prepared for when it happens. Lo and behold, first year of college, start hearing some little snide remarks from grad students because I'm playing Porgy and Bess, or like, and not even from my school, it's from different schools that I'd never heard of before. Because people had heard that I had auditioned at Michigan, or, or here or there, word gets around in the music world. So it's definitely something I wasn't really expecting, but I had always been prepared for, as far as people saying, like, people having opinions about me or opinions about my progression. Like, oh, he went to he went to percussion scholarship group, so he has all of these, like, he has it in. Or what's another thing? Someone said when I went to National Repertory Orchestra, they said I only got in because I was black.
Right.
Or things like that.
Yeah.
And so those were the types of things those were the remarks they were making, not so much about your playing or you being black specifically, but about like you're on a path to success because you're black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I'm both fighting it's like I'm both fighting how do you even know how to say it? You're fighting the fact that it's hard already to get a job. Like, like as many hours as I've been practicing, like I have to both practice and deal with the social norms and discrepancies and prejudices and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's a really big responsibility for me to both have the experience and know how to let people know what to do when they encounter these things. And I'm still learning because I'm only 26, but I've had a very, diverse career already. And so I've experienced a lot. So having my experiences hopefully will encourage people and inform people on how to deal with certain things. Mm-hmm. And hopefully make sure people aren't afraid to reach out as well, because that's a big thing. Because I there's a lot of times I didn't feel like I could talk to somebody about the things I was going through. People trying to get me off of a off of a sub list because I was too young, or not getting paid because I had just gotten hired for like things, a lot of random things that you would expect not in this business.
Well, I remember you really said that after the video, after the Uprocks video, how many people reached out to you, and that you were so I remember saying that I think I asked you something like, was that overwhelming? Like, and not in a bad way, but wow, you got so much response to this, and like all of this Facebook response. And, I know you said you got emails and stuff, but I remember that you were like, I love it. I love that I just got connected to all of these people that I can start a conversation with, and people that, I might be able to help a little bit, who might be going through a similar thing.
Yeah, again, it's just the importance of being seen. Like, there's not a lot of, I think Rainer Carroll was the last principal percussionist that was African-American descent, I think. Javon Gilliam in Nashville, principal. Douglas Caldwell, I think he's in New Mexico, but I'm not sure. So I can count on one hand how many African-Americans are in those prominent positions. And not that should matter, because it shouldn't, but it does, because it's us. It's like we have to do twice as good as everybody else in order to get halfway there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really important for me to have that and to be seen in an orchestra and to be successful.
Right.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of, and I know I've said this on the podcast before, Evelyn Glennie getting frustrated with getting too much attention about her hearing. And I remember distinctly when I was a kid seeing her on, or a kid, I was probably in college, so I wasn't a kid, but she was on David Letterman. And then there's a 60 Minutes special. And of course they always draw attention to her hearing, and she's kind of like, I'm also like a good player.
Yeah.
It's like, my story is not interesting because of my hearing. My story is interesting because I'm good. And that's, you know what I mean? So I can understand, like, people might be making awful comments like, oh yeah, he's interesting because he came from an underserved area and is now so successful, and that's why he's good. It's like, no, he's just good. He's also just good, you know?
Yeah, it's always a weird, I guess it's a paradox.
Yeah, and we have these similar, conversations about, gender inequality in the field too. And yeah, I think I've said this before, but I used to say, oh no, like, I don't feel any different being a woman, or no, I haven't been, and even if whatever, I didn't want to talk about it, or I don't think about it, or whatever. And now I realize the importance it is as, a minority in the field to stand up and be a role model. And you are in a position to be a role model and to be, sort of a mentor for others who might not be as lucky or as bold or brave or talented as you or any other person who has a disability or gender inequality or racial inequality. Yeah. It's important. So thank you for standing up.
It really is an honor to do that. I think I wrote a blog a long time ago about involuntary mentorship. Just because of what I do and where I am, it's not really my choice if I'm a mentor. Like, somebody looks up to me. And that's important.
It's a responsibility.
Yeah, it's really important for you to, like, know that and either embrace it or just allow it to happen, because somebody's gonna care. Like, there's probably a kid watching or listening. It's like, oh, I want to be a drummer too, Like, It's important that I say, oh, you can do it, just to be available for them. So, okay.
Right. Yeah, totally.
It reminds me of what my sister Allie said on her episode. My sister Allie is a vice principal at a middle school, and she had a lot to say about this sort of thing. And she talked about, for some people, yes, it's very important that they see the person of the right gender or skin color doing the thing they want to do. And for other people, it doesn't matter. I mean, it depends on that person's situation. So I think a lot of us might be in this conversation or with other people or listening right now and saying, like, oh no, it should all be just about the playing. It's like, okay, that's to you, but you don't know these other people's situation. I know Allie talked about some of her students' life situations, and I mean, some of the scary home situations people were in. No, all of a sudden it does matter that you have the right kind of role model, that it has the right skin color or has the right gender. So it's, like you don't know where people are coming from. Josh Jones, keep up the great work. I've loved watching your posts about practicing and the padding you've been doing on Facebook Live. And I'm going to figure out this Instagram thing and watch you on Instagram more. I'm going to learn. But it's been really great. And like you said about positive energy, you really do achieve that. I mean, I do really see that whenever you pop up on my social media feed. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us today too.
Oh, thanks again for having me. This has been fun.
Cool. Okay. Well, Megan and Laurel, catch you in a week. Or is it Bill Mersch next, I think?
I think so.
Something like that. Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, thanks everybody. We'll catch you on 155.
Awesome. Bye.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.